Hello and welcome to the Wake Up Podcast. I am Ben Kaysen, your host, here with Lisa Lima. Thank you for joining us, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, you've got a lot going on. Let's talk about it a little bit. So, what business do you run and what do you do?
Well, I've been training dogs for about 15 years.
Ooh,
My
cool.
business is called My Life Unleashed, and it's located here in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Colorado.
Oh, okay.
And so I use my expertise to work with service dogs, particularly the kind of service dogs that we would call them psychiatric service dogs.
Okay.
So they're basically service dogs that are there for mental health disorders and challenges.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's so cool. So, what got you into doing that?
Well, I've always loved training dogs. I grew up in Florida, where I started out my dog training career.
Gotcha.
And then I had a business over there as well. And then I said to myself, like, okay, I need a change of weather.
Oh, yeah, really?
And then headed to Colorado because, of course, the weather here is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then I opened up my business back here too, and ever since because I graduated when I was still in Florida. I graduated with my master's in social work.
Okay.
And then when I got to Colorado, I finished up my licensure in supervision, and I always knew I wanted to get into animal assisted therapy. Animal assisted therapy is a form of it's a form of therapy.
Okay.
So you're with clients, but you're basically utilizing animals as part of the therapeutic process.
Gotcha.
So in my case, I get to use dogs, and even further than that, service dogs.
Okay.
And it's really cool because the things that we do, the things that I do with my clients, they get to take their dogs home and continue to work with them.
Gotcha.
And that's what makes it so cool and so unique, because their dogs are helping them in their everyday lives.
Gotcha. So you're working to help the dogs be in a position to help the people.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. So where do you think that passion comes from? That passion for helping people like that?
Gosh, I loved, studying social work. I got my bachelor's in psychology.
Yeah.
Got my master's in social work. I always loved being in that helping profession, and dog training just followed me. I've done it for so long now that it's just it feels like a part of me. And I've worked with people of all ages, young kids as young as 6 or 7. I love working with teenagers, and of course adults.
Interesting.
As well. Yeah. So it really is a lot of fun. Service dogs are really unique though, because there's a big difference between service dogs and therapy dogs and emotional support animals. And a lot of people don't really know that right off the bat. I find myself educating the public a lot on those differences. Service dogs are the type of dogs that are trained to mitigate a disability. There's a lot of different types of service dogs. I mean, and a lot of usually people will think a guide dog. That's the first thing that comes in their mind, right? You picture this Labrador retriever, perhaps, guiding their handler, helping them throughout their everyday lives to be like their eyes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more to that with service. There's so many different categories. There's service dogs for hearing impaired. There's service dogs for mobility. There's service dogs for seizure response and alerting, diabetic as well, and there's psychiatric. So psychiatric, again, is that piece where service dogs are helping somebody to mitigate a disability that is a mental health disability.
That makes sense. So what does that look like then for training dogs to be able to fill that role? How long of a process is that typically?
So service dogs are in training for a very long time compared to other dogs.
Okay.
Typically when you have a pet dog and you want to get them trained, you might go through training for a few weeks or perhaps a couple months to get them to listen and sit and stay and all that cool stuff. But service dogs are in training for oftentimes 1.5 to 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
They go through a lot of training. And so Siri, who's laying down right beside me, she is going to be 9 months old in I want to say like 4 days. I know it's coming up, but shame on me. I don't remember her birthday.
you're
I'm
okay.
sorry, Siri. So,
Sorry, Siri.
so she's going to be with me until she's 2. And then Siri gets to find her forever person. And actually be there to help with their everyday lives.
Gotcha.
So throughout those 2 years, she's learning things like obedience. She's learning to do stuff like what she's doing now, like just lay down and kind of be quiet and sort of relax, and let her handler kind of do her thing. She goes into public with me and learns how to ignore distractions such as other service dogs, such as like being in line at the cashier at Safeway, and letting me do my groceries and all that kind of stuff. Restaurants as well. She's got to learn how to behave during restaurants and all of these different situations. So if you think about all that, you already have a great deal of training that goes into teaching a dog to just tune out their environment so that they can remain alert and focused on their handler.
Yeah.
Service dogs are not pets. They're seen as a medical necessity or medical equipment. And so they're invited anywhere or they're allowed public access anywhere in public. Because the same way that somebody who perhaps has trouble walking might need a wheelchair or a walker, they're allowed to bring their wheelchair and their walker anywhere. Service dogs, same thing.
Okay. So take me through what the process looks like then for you. So with say Siri, for example, did you get her whenever she was a pup and you've had her since then, or did she belong to someone else and then they brought them to you and you're training her?
I did. I got Siri when she was 8 weeks old.
Okay.
And once I got her, I started her training immediately. There's certain things that you can do with puppies and certain things you can't. So with young puppies, I'll often like to get them started as soon as possible on confidence building, foundation exercises, which is basically teaching them small things, comparatively speaking to the bigger things that they're going to be doing later on when they get older. So rather than teaching them obedience, we focus on hey, look, there's a water puddle over there. Let's go explore it. Let's walk over it. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And we'll have them navigate cool places. When Siri was really young, I would have her go in small spaces that maybe comparatively to something that you would find when you're walking through Home Depot and you have your an empty shelf, but on the bottom I'd have her kind of sneak in and go explore it and then come out, so that way she learns not to be afraid.
Yeah.
And then we also would work on engagement. Service dogs need to be attentive whenever they're out with their handlers, otherwise they're going to miss a cue possibly that where they're needed from. So for example, somebody who is having a seizure, their service dog is going to need to be able to clue in on that. And if they're distracted by everything else around them, they're not going to be able to do that.
Sure, and that has to be a quick reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so dogs like Siri, psychiatric service dogs, are trained to alert to things or respond to things like panic attacks. They're trained to be able to navigate outside of a building. So if their handler gets overwhelmed, they can just grab a hold of their dog and their dog will just take them out, lead them out, kind of like a guide dog.
Gotcha.
In that moment at least. And they do crowd control for people who suffer from PTSD. A lot of times they have trouble being out in crowded environments, or even environments such as the grocery store. And so dogs like Siri, they'll learn how to create space by doing something like a circle, a circling around their handler, just to make sure that like people aren't getting too close.
That's amazing. So like how does you like build in that as an instinct? Because obviously that's not like a basic command. I mean, that I assume that takes a ton of work. Can you take me like, obviously not every detail, but like what does that process look like to like train her to be able to do that?
So a lot of it is a lot of behaviors are complex behaviors that just kind of need like little bits of training at a time. So something as complex as perhaps navigating outside of a building might need you got to kind of break it up for the dog, especially when they're younger and they're just sort of learning everything. But you teach them what pressure means, like what leash pressure means, how to pull against that leash pressure, because if they have a harness that they're wearing and they feel like, some dogs, when they feel that they're being pulled one way, they'll stop walking. So you got to teach them to push through that. And then you start to teach them to figure out what the exit looks like. This is what an exit looks like. And then you teach them to little by little go toward that exit. With things like crowd control, Siri's in the process. Actually, she knows how to circle me if I'm standing, but we haven't started yet her circling with as I'm moving. So that's gonna take a little bit of extra time, so that she can understand, like, hey, if I take a little baby step, that doesn't mean that she stops. That means she keeps going until we can add more and more duration. So, and a lot of behaviors can be a little bit more simple. One thing that came really natural to Siri, I started teaching this to her when she was just about 9 weeks old. We call it behavior interruption. And what that means is that she's cluing into cues that may mean anxiety down the road or may mean a panic attack. And she'll interrupt those. So if I started to shake my leg really quick, she would come up and she would interrupt that. And then she'd come up on my lap and she would do what we call deep pressure therapy, which basically means kind of like the equivalent of like a weighted blanket. So she's helping to like slow down her handler's heart rate. And I mean, she's really cuddly in that moment. so it's kind of nice. Like you got like, oh, there's a puppy hanging out on me. So
she can just like sense that. Like, oh, that's like the goal, at least, that like they could sense that whenever their handlers like having that.
The goal would be that she can sense it down the road, but right now she's literally learning how to do it on certain cues. So for example, I've taught her 5 different cues. One of those cues is whenever her handler covers their face, she needs to come and interrupt that behavior.
Gotcha.
Another is if I'm like shaking my leg, like if we just like jitter shaking, like if I just like put my leg up and down really quick as if like I was nervous. So she'll alert to things like that. If I scratch my arm or my leg, I don't want to do it because we'll hear. But if I scratch my arm or my leg, she might she'll do that as well. Pacing, she'll interrupt pacing. And a few other cues I've been working on her with her as well, lip biting and dissociations as well, which can often look like just kind of like a pause, almost like a trance-like state.
Like you're zoning out for
exactly. So she'll learn to do that as well. And it really is, like these dogs are amazing for their handlers. They change their lives. It's a really rewarding job. You were asking me earlier, what really motivated me to get into this. And I just, every single day that I work with my clients, I'm like overjoyed.
That's amazing. So like talking about like training these dogs like this, is there a certain age, like at that point they like can't do that anymore? Or is it, can I take my 6-year-old dog, for example, and like try and train them on these things? Or do they have to be young and, do that?
That's a good question. 'Cause in some ways age can be a limiting factor, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
So I think when you look at things like age, It's sort of it could be like a situational scenario. Like it depends on the dog. It depends on the
Like what
on
habits they've
the
built.
fact- yeah, it depends on what their history is, what you need them for. If you have an older dog that you want to train as a true service dog, then you're looking at public access training. You're possibly looking at 2 years of training from that point on, unless the dog has some previous training experience. Some behaviors can be really easy to teach a dog because every dog kind of has a different temperament and aptitude, and some things are going to come more naturally to some dogs than others. Not every dog is meant to be a service dog either.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes total sense. So how many dogs are you working with at one point typically? Like, I know you have this dog and you mentioned that you have it, but like how many do you have at home that you're working with?
So Siri is the only dog that I have that I'm keeping for 2 years.
Great. Okay.
I also do group classes, and I offer private sessions, private sessions are my favorite because that's when I really get to work with my clients and learn about them, and I feel I can help them in a couple different avenues. But next year we have some really cool stuff coming up. I'm super excited because we are going to be offering board and train services for service dogs. And the other thing that we'll be doing as well is having a resource for people to be able to get service dogs for partial of very little price.
Gotcha.
Or even possibly free.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Service dogs, like a fully trained service dog, if somebody were to purchase a fully trained service dog that has had 2 years of training and a certain number of tasks, they can easily be looking at paying anywhere between 25 to 50 grand.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, the vast majority of the world can't afford that. I can't afford that.
Yeah.
So,
that's a year salary for some people. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if for a dog who for a dog who really makes a difference in their person's life, like this is not a need for a lot of people.
Sure.
And so there's the pathway that makes service dog training a whole lot more affordable is the pathway of what we call owner training. And in that sense, you're basically training. You have your own dog, and you're training them possibly with the help of a trainer. And that's where I like coming in.
Gotcha.
And helping my clients. And I'll do that through virtual sessions or through in-person sessions. And it makes training a whole lot easier. But I mean, the same, like if you were to go out and train your pet dog right now, you can spend a few $1,000s, and not everyone can afford that either. A service dog is going to need much more training than a pet dog. And so it's still not necessarily cheap. And so having an option in a way that we can help clients get a hold of this resource is going to be so amazing. And I'm just so excited for that.
That is so cool. Can you kind of talk to me a little bit about like, you're talking about your business, right? What does it offer specifically for people? Like what opportunities are there for them if they come to you as a client?
Dog training. So we have a few different trainers.
Okay.
And they're trained in our trainers do a multitude of different things. So when people are looking for dog training, sometimes they might need dog training because their dog is barking and lunging on leash at other dogs, or perhaps their dogs aren't getting along with certain family members. And we offer behavior modification. We also offer obedience of different levels, even off-leash obedience, and then of course the service dog training as well. I also work with because not everybody needs a service dog because they go through a lot of training.
Yeah.
I do have clients who would like to have an emotional support animal. In this case, that's what it would be called. That'd be the legal definition.
Yeah.
Or an in-home service dog, which are very, very similar. And There's there. I would say all those services. I also work with therapy dogs. Shouldn't forget that.
Oh,
Therapy dogs are also very different from service dogs and emotional
tell me about
support
that. What's
animals.
the difference between a therapy dog and an emotional support animal and all
So
that?
therapy dogs are the dogs that go out into hospitals and schools.
Gotcha.
Their main job is to provide comfort to others. So they're not there to mitigate a disability for their handler. They're not there to be there for their handler. They don't have to learn to ignore everything. They do go through a great deal of training, but it's not as much as a service dog might. So you can probably get away with not having to do 2 years of training for a therapy dog. But they are wonderful, and they do make a really great difference to a lot of people, as a lot of times dogs do.
Yeah.
They bring smiles.
For sure. No, I totally get that. We had a thing. I remember, like, I was really like at college, and I was like going through finals week, and I was just so stressed out. And they had this program. They like brought in probably 12 to 15 dogs just like into the dorms. And so I went over there and like saw them, and it like really just helped with the stress for like all the students. So I know that's a smaller scale than like what you're talking about with like going to hospitals and stuff like that, but the effect is real.
Yeah. And that's a great example of it. It is.
That's so cool. So can you tell me, like, are there any other projects that you're working on right now with all of your stuff coming up in the next couple of years?
Definitely, I would say the everything that we have next year regarding like the just having like a resource for people to be able to get their dogs trained. We also have a lot of cool programs that are coming up next year too.
Yeah.
So the board and train option, which would basically mean that your dog would be trained with a trainer and then go back to you. And of course also just different programs regarding more resources, I would say, regarding the private lesson piece. And virtual sessions. We've really had to get good at this pandemic thing.
I'm sure you have. That's a big adjustment right there. That's cool though. So how can people get plugged in and find out about those things and get involved that way?
So you can visit us at www.mylifeunleashed.biz. Our phone number is 719-626-3090. Look us up. We're also on Facebook, My Life Unleashed. You'll easily find us because when you search for us, you'll see a picture of a dog.
Nice.
and then you'll know it's us. So all those different ways you can get a hold of us. And with any questions, you can always email us or give us a call.
Fantastic. Hey, thank you so much for coming on, Lisa. Anything else you want to talk about anything you got going on?
I don't know. I could talk forever. I think we've covered it.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming in. That's really awesome. And, this is great to see somebody like you coming in, being so passionate about what you do and trying to help people this way. I mean, it's really fantastic to do. And obviously, that stuff is so complicated and so hard, and it's amazing that you're doing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, sure. Yeah, had a great time. You can go check out all the rest of our Wake Up podcasts right here at Wake Up Pueblo. You can go see, we've done some other business highlights that we've done, so go check out that series, as well as our series we've done with kind of the people here at Wake Up. So we've done kind of the different employees here, and then we're working with other businesses, so go check that out right here at Wake Up Pueblo. And then you want to give us one more plug, Lisa, how can they find you?
Visit us at mylifeunleashed.biz. Our phone number is 719-626-3090. My Life Unleashed, service dog training, obedience training, all the cool stuff that you get to do with your dog.
There you go. All the cool stuff.
All
Sounds
the
good.
cool stuff.
I love it. Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it. And obviously also thank you to Siri for being in here. The dog is, she's again, like,
She's
you can
wagging
tell,
her tail.
9-month-old dog. I've never seen a 9-month-old dog this quiet and this, respectful in this place like this. I love it. I love it. So thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye.